if we're being absolutely honest, this news tonight, this statement from him is huge, because I think it changes. For some people, it changes the entire narrative. For other people, it confirms a long-standing belief. And I think we've seen the Worcester news. The Worcester news came out, and there's this element of, well, the club has made him promises. They're not following up on the promises. And I've seen a lot of Newcastle fans sort of justify why it's not good. They're not condoning it, but they see it as different to the Isak situation. But Isak tonight has come out, and I'm going to read you what he has said here. He went, "I am proud to be recognised by my fellow professionals with a place in the PFA Premier League team of the season, which we just announced." He says, "First and foremost, I want to thank my teammates and everyone at Newcastle who supported me along the way. I am not at the ceremony tonight. With everything going on, it didn't feel right to be there. I've kept quiet for a long time whilst others have spoken. The silence has allowed people to push their own versions of events, even though they know it doesn't reflect what was really said and agreed behind closed doors. The reality is that promises were made, and the club has known my position for a long time. To now act as if these issues are only emerging is misleading. When promises are broken and trust is lost, the relationship can't continue. That's where things are for me right now, and why change is in the best interest of everyone, not just myself." And this is significant. And I'm going to give you my instant gut feeling to this first and foremost. I felt all along that the stories that David Ornstein has put out have been as close to the truth as possible. And of course, there may be some bits that are slightly embellished or exaggerated by Alexander Isak's camp. But he's essentially saying that what Ornstein told you last week, that for a long time, my stance of wanting to leave has been made to Newcastle. And all of the articles that we read live on the Football Terrace last week from the Newcastle press, the Craig Hopes, the Luke Steele, is it Luke Steele or Luke, whatever his name is, Keith, and all these guys that we were reading out, the idea that Newcastle are apoplectic, Newcastle are fuming, Isak's caused them a problem, this has come out of nowhere, they believed he wanted to stay. He is now publicly stating, in my opinion, what his statement says is that those claims are not true. He's also claiming that promises have been broken and trust is lost. He said that agreements have been made behind closed doors. Again, that suggests that when he told the club it was going to be his last season, when he reminded the club towards the end of the campaign that he wanted to move on, that suggests, and this bit's only a suggestion, this isn't a fact, that suggests that the club agreed to allow him to go. And we've seen this before. We've seen with Harry Kane when he didn't come back to training. And then it emerged many, many weeks later that he said goodbye to people at the training ground, friends, members of staff that he's known his whole footballing life, because he was informed that they were going to accept a bid of a certain level in the summer. Tottenham, they never accepted the bids that came in as promised. And of course, his move to Manchester City didn't materialize. But yet it was Harry Kane who was scapegoated to look like a scumbag. The media narrative was created and people went at him. We saw this with Raheem Sterling all those years ago when he joined Manchester City. There was this media attack due to false information coming out of certain sectors of sort of the Liverpool media that he wasn't going for footballing reasons. It was all about greed and money, because he was a greedy, disrespectful, nasty little man who only cared about lining his pockets, not about football. And that created an image of Raheem Sterling that I still think follows that man around today, that isn't a true reflection of himself. And it's funny because this week I've had a Newcastle fan sending me a picture every few days whenever we've discussed this Newcastle news. He continues to send me this quote from Sir Alex Ferguson, which essentially the quote reads, and I've got it here, that I've long understood that the press gravitates to what is popular and what will sell newspapers or boost TV ratings, even if what they publish sometimes isn't closely related to the truth. That was a quote from Sir Alex Ferguson. Now, Newcastle fans have been sending that to me. Well, it turns out there is a distinct possibility that the only media outlets, the credible ones, the ones that people respected, that have been pushing something that isn't remotely close or related to reality, is the Newcastle press again. And do you know why I'm hedging my bets on that? It's not about attacking Newcastle, the club, because the biggest group of people in this I feel sorry for are Newcastle fans. I think the Newcastle media on this Isak deal have had a mare. They have lied or not told both sides of the story all summer. Mbumo's costs were going to be astronomical. The salaries that Mbumo was going to be on, as a case in point. They continually shut down the idea from April, when the stories around Liverpool and Isak really picked up pace. And almost until now, they continue to shut down the stories. No chance, the club won't sell, he's not for sale. Don't listen to any of the noise. Don't listen to any of the nonsense, essentially, is the message that's been sent. And we've had the likes of Kane. We've had the likes of Ash that have come on the show. Mama Flossie, big up yourself in the comment section, who have consistently said that some things they said are right, and that's true, but have been very, very balanced in this, and also frustrated with the way in which the Newcastle-based media have reported on this deal. Isak's statement is huge. It isn't disrespectful. It isn't nasty. But I understand why at this point he's doing it. Because he today, has been, in the last few days, has had prominent Newcastle voices on social media wish career-threatening injuries on him. They've started dragging situations with Diogo Jota into this, as if to say, look how much Liverpool players loved and respected their teammates. Look how bad and horrible you are for wanting to leave and play somewhere else. It has become toxic. It has become nasty. He has received all manner of threats. And I believe so much of this is because the lies that have been printed about this man in the media. The likes of Simon Jordan pushing this, he'll do as he's told. Well, what this is where I've said all along, this loyalty narrative is a disgrace. This loyalty narrative is an abomination that I think we've got to sort of almost untwine this from the way in which we look at football. The way Simon Jordan has reported on this, I think, has been so one-sided, so demeaning, and so utterly ridiculous that, again, it's led to people to go, do you know what? He's right. Yeah, players shouldn't behave like this. Scumbag. Well, a promise was made. A promise was made. A promise has not been kept, according to him, and he has every right to stand up and challenge against it. And I still think that there'll be elements where Newcastle haven't done things wrong, because I'm going to be balanced about this, and I can't wait for the wood. I can't wait till we can see the wood for the trees. But overall, I think the way Liverpool have been framed and the way Isak has been framed in this conversation, I think has been utterly reprehensible on every single level. And there's a lot of people, and mainly the media I'm talking about here, should hang their heads in shame for their behavior, their disgraceful words, their lack of balance. I have seen Newcastle fans want journalists banned from the stadium, media outlets banned from the stadium, not for talking lies, what turns out maybe for speaking the complete and utter truth, which is why I've said for a number of days now, the idea of by the way, I don't want the lying media to some regard to also be banned, because I actually think that's the point of freedom of the press. Well, this story can come out and that story can come out. We can read it as intelligent people. We can make our minds up. And at some point, the truth does prevail. And you say, right, wow, now we know not to trust that person. Now we know that that person can be misleading, or this situation can lie. If you only get one half the story and you never get the full truth, you're basically an animal farm. So from my point of view, I think that this whole situation has been a disgrace. This whole situation I just had a gut feeling about this whole time, and more is going to come out. Why? Because it happens again and again and again and again, and it's always a player's fault. And there's something about that just has not sat right with me this entire time. And again, same with Wissa. I said it yesterday, and I'm going to say it again today. This is not a Newcastle attack per se, but I tweeted this exact same thing about Wissa yesterday. Clubs cannot continue lying to players, breaking promises to players, and expecting there to be no reaction. The same as any workplace on planet Earth. I employ people. If I make them promises, if I give them guarantees, if I say I will do X, Y, and Z, and then I completely go back on it without a logical, rational, or fair reason, I absolutely expect a backlash. And to not expect that just tells me you've never had a real job, you lack maturity, or you are just looking to troll online. You know, this is for me, it is a mess. It's a mess that I believe has been created by predominantly been created by Newcastle. The lack of ability to land replacements and targets this summer, clearly going back on some type of promise, some type of agreement that they had with Alexander Isak. And then the media on Tyneside, I think, have pushed some very, very false narratives. There's been some very weird statements, and we've had many Newcastle fans phone into the show and say that to us. And that's why that's where my view is. The people I feel most sorry for are the Newcastle fans. I think they have been mistreated in every single which way. And I believe, crazily, like we see when it comes to politics in this country, you get mistreated, you get screwed over, and then the powers that be point you in the wrong direction towards the wrong target. So you take your anger out on them when maybe you should be, it's almost like a sleight of hand. If they're making you look over here, if this is where you're being pointed to look the other fucking way.